The morning room at Halford House was quiet, the kind of stillness that came only when two people who had spoken for years now struggled to find words. Lady Cecily Halford set down her teacup with deliberate care, the porcelain meeting the saucer without a sound, and watched steam curl from the Duke of Westmere's cup as he lifted it halfway to his lips. His hand stopped mid-air, and for a heartbeat she thought he might speak, might finally say something that would make the last 2 years make sense. Instead, his fingers trembled, just enough that the tea rippled in the cup. And she knew, with the clarity that comes from watching a person too closely for too long, that whatever she was about to say would break something between them that had never been whole. She spoke anyway, her voice steady even as her pulse hammered against her throat. "I accepted Lord Fenwick's proposal this morning." The cup did not reach his lips. It remained suspended, steam rising between them like a veil. And when she met his eyes, she saw something she had never seen before. Not indifference, not the careful neutrality he had worn like armor through every dinner, every political gathering, every charged conversation that had ended without conclusion. She saw devastation. "Congratulate me," Cecily said, and heard the edge in her own voice, the challenge she had not intended but could not withdraw. Benedict Chelworth, Duke of Westmere, sat across from her with a cup of tea he would never drink, and said nothing at all. She had not always known his silence would cost her everything. 14 months earlier, she had corrected his reading of canal law at her father's dinner table, and Benedict had realized, with the slow certainty of a man who had never believed in such things, that he would never meet anyone more precise. The Marquis of Halford's dining room had been full that evening. Politicians, solicitors, a bishop who drank too much port. But Benedict had heard only Cecily's voice as she leaned forward, her finger tracing a line on the document spread beside her plate. "The provision applies to navigable waterways only," she had said. Not to him specifically, but to the table at large, her tone the same she might use to describe the weather. "The language is clear. If the canal does not connect to tidal waters, the Crown's interest is advisory, not regulatory." She had looked up then, her gaze landing on Benedict for the first time that evening, and added, "Your analysis was nearly correct, Your Grace. But nearly is not sufficient when the Privy Council is involved." Benedict had set down his fork. "You have read the statute." "I manage my father's correspondence," Cecily had replied. "I read everything." That should have been the beginning. It was not. Because 3 days after that dinner, Mr. Graves arrived at Westmere with a leather folio and a warning that would make every word Benedict wanted to say impossible. Now, in the morning room, Cecily rose from her chair. The movement was smooth, practiced, the same grace she had used to navigate 2 years of proximity that had never become declaration. She did not wait for Benedict to respond. She had waited long enough. "I will see myself out," Cecily said, and left him sitting with a full cup in an empty room. Mr. Graves had arrived on a Tuesday, which Benedict would remember later only because Tuesdays were when he met with his estate steward, and the meeting had been interrupted. The Privy Council solicitor was a narrow man with ink-stained fingers and the careful diction of someone who knew that words, once spoken in certain rooms, could not be retracted. "The canal matter," Graves said, settling into the chair across from Benedict's desk at Westmere, "has become more complicated than we anticipated." Benedict had been reviewing grain contracts. He set them aside. "Go on." "Lord Halford's name appears in several documents related to the Medway Canal investment scheme," Graves said. He opened the folio and withdrew a stack of correspondence, each page marked with red wax seals. Investor funds were misappropriated. The syndicate promised a return of 12%. The actual construction costs were half what was reported. The difference was distributed among the partners. Halford is not a partner, Benedict said. Graves nodded. But his signature appears on 3 letters recommending the scheme to potential investors. One of those investors was the Earl of Ashford, who has since lost £4,000. Ashford is prepared to bring the matter before Parliament unless the Privy Council intervenes. Benedict took the letters. Halford's handwriting was unmistakable, the same precise script Cecily used when she annotated documents. He read the first letter twice, then the second. The language was careful, measured. Halford had not guaranteed returns. He had simply stated that the syndicate's projections appeared sound based on the engineering reports provided. "This is not fraud?" Benedict said. "No," Graves said. "But it will look like fraud if the matter becomes public." Halford trusted the wrong men. That is not a crime, but it will destroy his reputation. And if the investigation proceeds, every letter he wrote, every dinner he hosted, every political favor he extended will be examined. The scandal will consume him. Benedict set the letters on the desk. "What are you proposing?" "A private resolution," Graves said. "The Privy Council has the authority to arrange compensation for the investors without a public inquiry. If the funds are repaid quietly, Ashford withdraws his complaint, and Halford's name does not appear in the official report." "And the cost?" "Approximately £18,000, distributed over 12 months. Uncardier," Graves said. "The syndicate partners will contribute half. The remainder must come from other sources." Benedict understood immediately. "You want me to fund the compensation?" "You are the only member of the Privy Council with both the resources and the discretion to manage this without drawing attention," Graves said. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "But there is a complication, Your Grace. If you propose to Lady Cecily while this matter is unresolved, the marriage will appear transactional. It will trigger a conflict of interest review. The investigation will become public, and everything we are trying to prevent will happen anyway." The room was very quiet. Outside, Benedict could hear the gardener trimming the hedges, the rhythmic snip of shears against boxwood. "How long?" Benedict asked. 12 to 14 months, Graves said. "Possibly longer if Ashford becomes impatient. But if you can wait, if you can keep this matter contained, Halford's name will be clear. And when you propose, no one will question your motives." Benedict looked at the letters again. He thought of Cecily at her father's table, her finger tracing lines of text, her voice steady as she corrected men twice her age. He thought of the way she had looked at him 3 days ago, as though she were waiting for him to say something that mattered. "I will fund the compensation," Benedict said. "Arrange the payments through my solicitor. Halford's name does not appear in any report." Graves nodded. "And the lady?" Benedict did not answer immediately. He folded the letters and handed them back. "I will wait." That had been 14 months ago. He had waited. He had redirected the investigation, arranged the payments, kept Halford's name out of every document that crossed the Privy Council's desk. He had attended dinners at Halford House, sat beside Cecily at political gatherings, engaged in conversations that left him aching, because they were so close to what he wanted and so far from what he could say. He had protected her father in silence, believing that when the matter was resolved, when his hands were clean, he would finally be able to speak. He had been wrong. Because while he was protecting her family, Lord Fenwick had walked into Halford House and said the one thing Benedict had not. I would like to marry you. Lord Fenwick called on Cecily 4 days after the Halford dinner, where she had corrected the Duke's canal law. He was a viscount of modest estate and plain speech, the kind of man who stated his business without preamble and expected the same in return. Cecily received him in the drawing-room. Her aunt, Lady Dalton, sat in the corner with her embroidery, close enough to observe propriety, but far enough to grant the illusion of privacy. Fenwick did not sit. He stood in front of the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, and looked at Cecily with the steady regard of a man who had made a decision and saw no reason to delay its execution. "Lady Cecily," he said, "I would like to marry you. I am telling you so because you deserve to know." Cecily set down the book she had been pretending to read. "That is very direct, Lord Fenwick." "I do not see the value in pretending otherwise," Fenwick said. "You are the most capable woman I have met. I have an estate that requires management and a political career that requires a partner who can think. I believe we would suit each other well. If you disagree, tell me now, and I will not trouble you again." It was not a romantic proposal. It was not even a particularly flattering one. But it was honest, and after 2 years of watching the Duke of Westmere say nothing, honesty felt like water in a desert. "I would like time to consider," Cecily said. "Of course," Fenwick said. He inclined his head. "I will call again in a week." He did, and when he returned, Cecily gave him her answer. The engagement was announced in the Morning Post on a Thursday. Benedict received the news at breakfast, reading the notice 3 times before setting the paper down beside his untouched toast. The words were simple, formal. "The Marquis of Halford is pleased to announce the engagement of his daughter, Lady Cecily Halford, to Robert Grenville, Viscount Fenwick. The wedding will take place in June. June, 3 months away. The canal compensation would not be complete until April at the earliest." Benedict folded the paper and left the breakfast room. He did not finish his tea. Cecily began wedding preparations with Lady Dalton, who praised Fenwick's honesty and warned her niece that a man who protected in secret was a man who decided without asking. "Fenwick tells you what he thinks," Lady Dalton said, examining a bolt of ivory silk in the modiste's front room. "He does not leave you guessing." Her voice was quiet. "No, he does not." "The Duke has had 2 years," Lady Dalton continued, her tone careful. "If he intended to speak, he would have done so by now." Cecily did not answer. She ran her hand over the silk and tried not to think about the way Benedict's hand had trembled when she told him she was engaged. They crossed paths at a reception 3 weeks after the engagement was announced. It was a small gathering at Lord Pemberton's townhouse, ostensibly to discuss the upcoming parliamentary session, but actually an excuse for politicians to drink port and complain about the Prime Minister. Cecily arrived with her father. Benedict was already there, standing near the fireplace with a glass he had not touched, listening to a conversation he was not part of. She felt his gaze before she saw him. It was a physical thing, a weight on her skin that made her turn toward the fireplace, even though she had intended to greet Lady Pemberton first. Their eyes met across the room. Neither looked away. Lord Halford guided Cecily toward a cluster of guests near the windows, introducing her to a minister she had met twice before. The minister, Townsend, a man with thinning hair and opinions he believed were facts, smiled at Cecily with the condescension reserved for women at political gatherings. "Lady Cecily," Townsend said, "I understand congratulations are in order. Fenwick is a fortunate man." She nodded. "Thank you." "Your father must be relieved," Townsend continued, his smile sharpening, "given the unfortunate business with the canal investments. It is wise to secure an alliance with a family of unquestioned standing. The room did not go silent, but the conversation near them faltered. Halford's expression did not change, but Cecily saw the tension in his jaw, the way his hand tightened on his walking stick. Before she could respond, Benedict stepped between them. He did not speak immediately. He simply moved, his shoulder turned, his body blocking Townsend's sightline to Halford and Cecily both. Halford's judgment built 3 hospitals and financed the reconstruction of the northern bridge after the flood, Benedict said, his voice quiet and precise. What has yours built, Townsend? Townsend's smile vanished. I did not mean to suggest. Benedict's tone was ice. Yes, you did. And now you will apologize to Lord Halford, or you will leave. Townsend left. The conversation resumed. Halford nodded to Benedict, a brief acknowledgement, and moved toward another group. Cecily remained where she was, looking at the Duke's back, at the rigid line of his shoulders. I did not need protection, she said quietly. Benedict turned. His gaze was steady, but there was something beneath it, something she could not name. No, he said, but I needed to provide it. He walked away before she could ask what he meant. That evening, Cecily sat at the pianoforte in her music room, playing a piece she had memorized years ago. Her hands moved over the keys without thought, the melody filling the space around her. She did not hear the door open. She did not hear his footsteps on the carpet. She only knew he was there when his hand settled on her shoulder, warm and solid, his thumb tracing the line of her collarbone through the fabric of her gown. She hit a wrong note, the first he had ever heard from her. Her hand stilled, hovering above the keys, but she did not pull away. Benedict did not move. His hand remained, his thumb brushing the hollow at the base of her throat, and Cecily felt her breath catch in a way that had nothing to do with the music. She resumed playing. The piece continued, note by note, and his hand stayed until the final chord faded into silence. Then he withdrew, and when she turned, he was gone. The letter was not hidden. It sat on her father's desk in plain view, folded but not sealed, the Duke's crest visible on the corner of the page. Cecily had come to her father's study looking for the guest list for the wedding breakfast, and instead she found a note that inverted everything she thought she understood. Halford, the canal matter will be resolved by the end of April. Graves assures me the compensation is proceeding without delay. I ask for your patience a little longer. When this is finished, your name will be clear, and no one will question what I should have said 2 years ago. You, Cecily, read it twice. Then she set it down, walked to the door, and called for her father. Lord Halford entered the study 5 minutes later, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to resignation when he saw the letter in Cecily's hand. You were not meant to see that, he said. What canal matter? Cecily asked. Halford closed the door. He crossed to the desk and picked up the letter, folding it carefully before setting it in a drawer. The Medway Canal investment. 3 years ago, I recommended the scheme to several acquaintances based on reports I believed were accurate. The reports were fraudulent. Investors lost money. The Duke has been arranging private compensation to prevent a public inquiry. For how long? Cecily asked. He met her eyes. 14 months. Cecily felt something shift inside her, a foundation she had built her certainty on cracking beneath her feet. He has been protecting you for 14 months. Her father nodded slowly. Yes. And he did not tell me. Halford looked at his daughter, and his expression was kind but unyielding. He did not tell you because telling you would have made you carry the weight of it. He believed he was sparing you. That was not his decision to make, Cecily said, and heard the anger in her voice, sharp and bright. He chose for me. He decided what I could bear knowing, and he left me to believe. She stopped, her hands curling into fists at her sides. I thought he was indifferent. I thought 2 years of silence meant he did not care. He cared, Halford said quietly. He cared enough to sacrifice his own timeline to protect this family. That is not indifference, Cecily. Her voice was hard. No, it is control. She left the study before her father could respond. She found Benedict in the garden at Halford House 2 days later. He was standing near the south wall, his hands clasped behind his back, looking at nothing in particular. Cecily did not announce herself. She simply walked across the gravel path until she was close enough that he could not pretend he had not heard her approach. "You protected my father without telling me," she said. Benedict turned. His expression was calm, but she saw the tension in the set of his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened before he spoke. "Yes. For 14 months. He held her gaze. "Yes. And in all that time, it never occurred to you that I might want to know?" Cecily asked. "That I might want a choice in how my own family's crisis was managed?" "If I had told you," Benedict said, his voice low and deliberate, "you would have carried the weight of the investigation. You would have spent 14 months wondering if your father would be ruined. If every social gathering was the one where someone would ask the wrong question. I did not want that for you." "That was not your decision to make," Cecily said. And the words came out louder than she intended, sharp enough that a gardener working near the gate looked up briefly before returning to his task. "You chose for me, Benedict. You decided what I could bear, and you left me in the dark while you played savior." "I was not playing," Benedict said. And for the first time, she heard anger in his voice, quiet but unmistakable. "I was protecting your father from ruin and you from a scandal that would have followed you for the rest of your life. If that makes me guilty of deciding without consulting you, then I am guilty. But I would make the same choice again." Her words were final. "Then you have learned nothing." She turned and walked back toward the house, and Benedict did not follow. The card party at Lady Pemberton's was a small affair. 20 guests seated at 4 tables, the kind of evening where political alliances were formed over whist and reputations were dismantled between hands. Cecily arrived with Fenwick, who was punctual and polite, and entirely unaware that the woman on his arm was performing contentment rather than feeling it. Benedict was already there, seated at the far table with Lord Ashford and 2 men Cecily did not recognize. He looked up when she entered, and their eyes met for half a second before she turned deliberately toward Fenwick and smiled. "Shall we?" Fenwick asked, offering his arm. Cecily took it. She let Fenwick guide her to their table, laughed at his observation about the Prime Minister's recent speech, and played her cards with the same precision she brought to everything. And across the room, Benedict watched. She knew he was watching. She felt it like heat on her skin, a constant awareness that made her hyper-conscious of every gesture, every word. When Fenwick leaned close to murmur something about their opponent's strategy, Cecily laughed again, louder than necessary, and placed her hand on his sleeve. Benedict set down his cards. He rose from his seat without excusing himself, crossed the room, and left through the side door. The game continued. Cecily won her hand, and when the evening ended and Fenwick escorted her to her carriage, Lady Dalton appeared at her elbow with a look that could have frozen wine. "You did that to hurt him," Lady Dalton said. Cecily's voice was flat. "He was never hurt by me." "Then why did he leave the room?" Cecily did not answer. She climbed into the carriage and sat in silence all the way home, wondering when she had started caring more about punishing Benedict than about marrying Fenwick. Fenwick confronted her the next afternoon. He arrived at Halford House without sending word, which was unlike him, and asked to speak to Cecily privately, which was even more unlike him. They stood in the drawing room. Fenwick did not sit. Neither did Cecily. "You took my arm last night to punish a man across the room," Fenwick said, his tone matter-of-fact. "I will not be your instrument." Cecily felt her face flush. "Robert, I proposed to you because I believed you were capable of honesty," Fenwick continued. "I still believe that. But if you want to break this engagement, break it because you want something else, not because he finally spoke." She shook her head. "He has not spoken." "He has been speaking for 14 months, Fenwick said. "You simply were not listening. Or perhaps you were listening, and you did not like what you heard." He crossed to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "I will not step aside gracefully, Cecily. If you want to end this, you will have to choose to do so, actively. Not because I made it easy for you." He turned back to her, and his expression was not unkind. "I will call on you in a week. If you wish to proceed with the wedding, I will be honored. If you do not, I will accept your decision without resentment. But you must decide, not drift." He left. Cecily stood in the empty drawing room and realized, for the first time, that she had been drifting for 2 years. The canal compensation completed on the 20th of April. Mr. Graves sent word to Westmere that the final payments had been made, the investors repaid in full, and Lord Halford's name would not appear in the Privy Council's official report. Benedict read the letter twice, then sent a note to Halford House requesting a small gathering at Westmere to present the results. He did not specify who should attend. He trusted Halford to understand. The night before the meeting, Cecily could not sleep. She walked the garden at Halford House, her shawl wrapped tight against the April chill, and tried to make sense of the last 2 years. She had been so certain that Benedict's silence meant indifference, certain that Fenwick's honesty meant compatibility, certain that choosing safety over risk was the rational course. She was no longer certain of anything. She found him sitting on a bench outside the garden wall, looking up at the windows of Halford House. He did not turn when she approached, but he shifted slightly, making room. Cecily sat beside him. The bench was cold beneath her, the night air sharp enough to sting her lungs. Neither of them spoke. She placed her hand on the bench between them, palm up, an offering, a question. Benedict covered it with his own. His hand was warm, his grip firm but not tight. And Cecily felt something inside her chest unclench, a knot she had carried for so long she had forgotten it was there. They sat in silence until the church clock struck 2. Cecily withdrew her hand first. She stood, her shawl slipping from her shoulders, and looked down at him. "Tomorrow you will tell me everything," she said, "because I ask you to." Benedict looked up at her, and for the first time in 2 years, his expression was unguarded. Yes. The Westmere Library was a smaller room than the ballroom where Benedict usually entertained, lined with books and smelling faintly of leather and tobacco. A fire burned in the hearth, the flames casting shifting shadows on the ceiling. 8 people gathered. Cecily, Benedict, Lord Halford, Lady Dalton, Fenwick, Mr. Graves, and 2 witnesses Graves had brought from the Privy Council's office. Benedict stood at the head of the table. In front of him lay a stack of receipts, each one signed and sealed, documenting every payment made to the Medway Canal investors over the past 14 months. "The compensation is complete," Benedict said. His voice was steady, formal, the tone he used when addressing the Privy Council. Every investor has been repaid in full. Lord Halford's name does not appear in the official report. The matter is closed. He picked up the receipts and placed them in front of Halford. Your reputation is intact. You are free. Halford looked at the documents, then at Benedict. Thank you, Your Grace. Benedict nodded. Then he turned to Cecily. This is what my silence bought, he said, and his voice was quieter now, stripped of formality. Your father is safe. It cost me you. The room was very still. Lady Dalton set down her teacup. Graves folded his hands on the table. Fenwick watched Cecily with the same steady regard he had used when he proposed. Why did you not tell me? Cecily asked. Because I did not want you to carry the burden, Benedict said. I thought if I could resolve it quietly, if I could clear your father's name without exposing you to the investigation, I could propose with clean hands. I thought I was protecting you. Her voice was level. You were managing me. Benedict met her eyes. Yes, I was wrong. You were wrong to decide what I could bear, Cecily said, and her voice was steady but not cold. You were wrong to assume I needed protection more than I needed truth. You were wrong to believe that loving someone silently was enough. He didn't flinch. Yes. Fenwick spoke from his chair, his tone calm and deliberate. Cecily, I told you, break it because you want something else, not because he finally spoke. Cecily looked at Fenwick. She saw the honesty in his face, the decency that had made her accept his proposal in the first place. He deserved better than a woman who had spent the last 3 weeks punishing another man. I want something else, Cecily said. I am sorry, Robert. Fenwick stood. He crossed to where she sat and placed his hand briefly on her shoulder. Don't be sorry. Be certain. Her words were firm. I am certain. And I am still sorry. Because you deserved better than being the man I chose because the right man was silent. Fenwick nodded. He looked at Benedict, his expression unreadable, then turned and left the library. The door closed quietly behind him. The room emptied slowly. Halford rose first, murmuring something to Graves about reviewing the final documents. Lady Dalton followed, pausing at the door to look back at her niece with an expression that might have been approval. The witnesses departed. Graves gathered his papers and withdrew. And then it was only Cecily and Benedict, alone in a library that smelled of smoke and old leather. You were wrong not to tell me, Cecily said. Benedict's voice was quiet. Yes. I was wrong to believe your silence meant what my mother's silence meant, Cecily said. She stood, crossing the space between them until she was close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weariness in his jaw. What did her silence mean? That she was gone, Cecily said. That nothing unspoken ever gets finished. Benedict reached for her hand, his fingers curling around hers. Say it now, Cecily said. I love you, Benedict said. I have loved you since you corrected my canal law, and I realized I would never meet anyone more precise. I have loved you through 14 months of silence, and I will love you through whatever comes next if you will let me. That is what you should have said 2 years ago, Cecily said. He didn't look away. Yes. We have both been wrong, Cecily said. Yes. That is a terrible foundation for a marriage, Cecily said. Benedict's voice was steady. It is an honest one. Cecily gripped the front of his waistcoat with both fists and pulled him toward her. The kiss began with her pulling, fierce and deliberate. And when she released him and stepped back, his hand caught the back of her neck and pulled her close again. The second kiss was slower. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, and her hands flattened against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath the fabric. When they finally pulled apart, Cecily rested her forehead against his and smiled. "Better late than never, Your Grace." He smiled back, considerably. The morning room at Halford House, 6 weeks later. Same table, same tea service, sunlight slanting through the windows and illuminating the steam rising from 2 cups. Cecily poured, her movements practiced and unhurried. She slid Benedict's cup toward him across the polished wood. "Drink your tea." Benedict lifted the cup. It reached his lips. He drank, then set it down with a faint smile. "Better?" She returned his smile. "Considerably." Spring arrived in full force, turning the gardens green and filling the air with the scent of lilac and new grass. The music room at Halford House became Cecily's refuge again, the place where she played without audience or expectation. She sat at the pianoforte one afternoon in May, her fingers moving over the keys, playing a piece she had learned as a child. Benedict sat in the chair by the window, a book open on his lap, not watching her, not needing to. She finished one piece and began another. He turned a page. A letter from Fenwick sat on the side table, arrived that morning with news that he had remarried, a widow from Derbyshire with 3 children and a fondness for practical conversation. "I am content," he had written. "I hope you are as well." Cecily glanced at the letter, then at Benedict, who had looked up from his book to meet her gaze. "Are you content?" she asked. His answer was simple. "Yes." She resumed playing. The melody filled the room, neither of them performing, neither of them proving anything. Just 2 people in the same room who had arrived there by being wrong about each other and brave enough to say so. The music continued, note by note, and outside the window, the world moved on,